And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Wednesday morning's flying weather showing a band of IFR here from eastern Kodiak Island right on up along the western Alaska range. VFR to Sitna Valley across the Copper River Basin and northward up to a good portion of the North Slope and Arctic coast, as well as the Panhandle, good VFR. Marginal VFR here over the western part of the state, and then becoming VFR for the Bering Sea and the Aleutians, but some IFR starting to creep in there to the southwest of Shimiatu and Amchitka. And then that band with the next front here pushes eastward tomorrow afternoon right in across the central Aleutians. Not too bad here over the eastern Bering Sea, Pribilofs down to Unalaska Island, Alaska Peninsula, Bristol Bay on up into the Seward Peninsula VFR. Some marginal VFR, northern Bering Sea, a little bit here along the western Brooks Range down in toward Kotzebue and the western Arctic coast. VFR, North Slope on down into the central interior of the state. And then a storm system coming into the Gulf and associated front pushing some IFR northward to the North Gulf Coast and southern Prince William Sound in across Fognak Island and the Barrens to Kamishak Bay. And IFR pressing in toward the coastline, but only marginal VFR showing up along the immediate coast there, VFR elsewhere. And then for the next day, that moves on through, and we're left with marginal VFR for Thursday morning over the southeast coast. IFR hung up along the North Gulf Coast into Prince William Sound. Interior, not too bad, other than some marginal VFR here for Cook Inlet and the Kenai Peninsula. Remainder of interior Alaska, mostly VFR, all the way up to the Arctic coast. Then you get into some marginal VFR there. Narrow band of IFR from the Pribilofs down to the eastern Aleutians, western Alaska Peninsula. And for Thursday afternoon, Bering Sea now, mostly marginal, as well as the Aleutians into the western Alaska Peninsula. But Nunivak Island here in the southwest coast, Bristol Bay, good VFR. Some marginal VFR there in the lower Yukon River Valley area, as well as the western Alaska range. And down across the Barren Islands, Kamishak Bay, marginal VFR up to the North Gulf Coast. And most of the Panhandle with some VFR mixed in. Central eastern interior part of the state, mostly VFR. And for Anatuvik and Adigan tomorrow, occasional marginal VFR for both those passes through the day Wednesday. Lake Clark and Merrill, IFR improving to marginal VFR. Rainy, marginal VFR improving to VFR. And for Windy, Isabel and Mentasta, all three passes there, VFR for the eastern Alaska range, central and eastern Alaska range. And then Tanita, marginal VFR, and with increasing clouds coming in from the east and southeast, becoming marginal VFR, especially on the eastern entrance at some point in the afternoon. And for Portage, marginal VFR the entire day. Chilkoot and White should squeeze another VFR day out there. And for the freezing levels at the surface just south of St. Lawrence Island, just west of Nunivak Island, down across Kodiak Island, up into the Kenai Peninsula, and then over the Panhandle, 2,000 feet, way down toward Dixon Entrance. And also 2,000 feet here just south of the west central Aleutians. And for icing, with that front pushing eastward here, look for some considerable moderate rime icing to slide from the central Aleutians in toward the eastern Aleutians during the afternoon hours, staying well southwest of the Pribilofs. And another area here with that storm system coming up into the Gulf and associated front, considerable moderate turbulence here for icing, considerable moderate rime icing for the southeast coast, North Gulf Coast, on in across the Kenai Peninsula and Cook Inlet. And for the jet stream, low pressure coming up to just east of Kodiak Island, 33,000 feet, another low center or trough here over the western part of the state. So we've got south to north flow up to 70 knots coming into the eastern North Gulf Coast. And the strongest jet well south of the Aleutians. 9,000 feet, 50-knot winds coming up in toward the Atka Island area ahead of this low-pressure center. Otherwise, 45-knot southerlies there right across the central north slope to the east-central Arctic coast. And southeast winds 40 knots up into the North Gulf Coast and anywhere from 35 to 45 knots, same direction, mostly southerly there for the Panhandle. 3,000 feet here, 60-knot winds ahead of that front, right along the North Gulf Coast there, and 50 to 60-knot winds down along the coast of the Panhandle. Otherwise, pretty light over the interior. And we've got south-southeasterly 60 knots ahead of this eastward moving front in the Aleutians in the Bering Sea. And with that, we'll see considerable moderate turbulence here, pushing eastward to Lumak Island, Nikolsky, extending back to the central Aleutians, and again for Shimianatu. And considerable moderate turbulence, pretty likely tomorrow here with that storm system coming into the Gulf from Kodiak Island, Kenai Peninsula, all the North Gulf Coast and across the Panhandle.